Absolutely devastating and savage final stands, shockingly brutal murders, and so many horrendous clone ends are just a few examples of when Star Wars TV tales went the seriously dark, shocking, or heartbreaking route with a demise. Sometimes it worked a treat and added some serious emotional weight to a story. Other times you could argue the creators perhaps went a little bit too far. Some deaths were even censored when an episode first aired. Either way, there was just no forgetting these alarming TV deaths after they showed up on your screen. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Star Wars, and here are the 10 most messed up deaths in Star Wars TV shows. Before we get started, we've also done a couple of other versions of this list, so go and check them out after you finish this video. We got the sequel trilogy, we got the original trilogy, and you guessed it, we got the prequel trilogy. Anyway, back to this list. Number 10, Obi-Wan refuses to help Nari, who is then killed and hung. Obi-Wan Kenobi was in a pretty dark place during the opening stages of his Disney Plus show. A decade on from having to slice up his one-time Padawan and watch the Jedi Order fall, a broken Kenobi had hidden himself away on Tatooine and cut himself off from the Force. That's why he refused to really help poor Nari when the hunted Jedi begged him for assistance in Part 1. His fear of being discovered, not being able to protect young Luke Skywalker, and his refusal to believe the surviving Jedi stood a chance against the Empire, resulted in him telling Nari to just let it go and live a normal life. Kenobi was in an unenviable situation here. Had he helped Nari and tried to fight off the Inquisitors, that could lead the Empire right to Tatooine and Luke. But if he just left Nari to fend for himself, then there was always a chance he could be murdered by those Jedi hunters. Sure enough, the latter ultimately happens, with Kenobi then made to look at the dreadful results of his decisions in the aftermath, as the Inquisitors hung a lifeless Nari in the middle of Anchorhead. Number 9, Paz Vizsla fights off the Commandos but brutally falls to the Praetorian Guards. The galaxy far away has seen some unquestionably brutal last stands, joining moments like the slaughtering of Ki-Adi-Mundi as he attempted to fend off clones during Order 66, and Commander Thrawn's valiant final moments before being savagely killed by droids, was Paz Vizsla's awful demise in The Mandalorian Season 3. After watching him go from a heavy infantry Mandalorian who regularly clashed with Din Djarin, to a person who was willing to fight alongside both Mando and Bo-Katan Kryze, this loving father's brave end was a truly painful one. To ensure the safety of his fellow Mandalorians after they were trapped by Moff Gideon and his forces, Vizsla unleashed a barrage of blaster fire at the Imperial Commandos, buying his pals some time to escape. Then, after it seemed like Vizsla had somehow managed to overcome the odds, any chance of him joining up with his Beskar-plated friends was cruelly destroyed. Had Vizsla been at full strength, he still would have probably struggled to overcome a trio of badass and merciless Imperial Praetorian guards. But with the big lad already shattered after fending off so many enemies, the viewer was just forced to watch the inevitable unfold. It was all quite harrowing. Sure, he put up a bit of a fight, but a few horrifically accurate slashes and stabs later, Vizsla had been dispatched in a rather messed up and emotional conclusion to Chapter 23, The Spies. Number 8, Nemik is crushed and dies on the operating table. The terrific first season of Andor threw out a number of utterly soul-crushing events. Who will ever forget the revelation of Kino Loy's inability to swim, for example? Not me. But arguably just as heart-rending and cruel as that occurrence was the way Rebel Karis Nemik was horrifically torn out of this galaxy far away. During Cassian Andor and the gang's heist on Aldhani, this idealistic soul was unfortunately crushed by the very payroll they were trying to rob from the Empire. He'd managed to avoid being blasted by the various Imperials trying to keep them from achieving their goal, but was unable to do a thing to stop that heavy weight landing on him as Andor blasted their ship out of the base. Despite not being able to feel his legs, Nemik actually managed to hold on long enough to help guide the team to safety. In the end though, his injuries were just too severe to fix, and Nemik joined the likes of Gorn and Barcona as members of the squad who failed to survive the perilous mission. What made Nemik's death more messed up than someone like Skeens, for example, who was shot by Andor after suggesting they should flee with the money as Nemik was operated on, was the fact he genuinely believed in the rebel cause, unlike the latter. He even wrote a manifesto about how the Empire had oppressed the galaxy and he believed that they would be defeated one day. But all of that optimism and passion still could not save him from being a casualty in the fight for freedom. Number 7, so many clones, particularly the ones infected by brainworms. Each and every clone ever created on Kamino was well aware that there was a good chance they'd fail to see the end of the Clone Wars. That being said, very few of them likely expected to go out in the utterly disturbing ways they did at various points in the titular animated series. While many a trooper was taken out by your bog-standard blaster shot or explosion, there were also those who ended up being sliced in half by a door, slaughtered and broken by rogue Jedi Masters, and disturbingly beheaded by Maul. Yeah, it was a grim life being a clone at times, but it somehow gets more messed up than that. A number of clones ended up being infected by brain worms during the Brain Invaders episode, with some of these troopers being convinced to kill their own pals via these mind-controlling parasites, or being impaled by Barriss Offee after trying to bring her to the worm's side. Put simply, this was one brutal and unsettling show when it wanted to be, and we will prove that again a few more times before we end this list. Number 6. Quill dies trying to protect Grogu. So close, but yet so far is definitely one way to describe the heartbreaking end of Quill in The Mandalorian. Introduced during the first season of the hit Disney Plus show, he was a caring and intelligent Ugnaught who had worked all his life 3 human lifetimes to earn his freedom. After helping Din Djarin and his pals throughout that season, Quill then agreed to protect Grogu during the team's mission to Navarro. That was the beginning of the effed up end for this sweet soul. The team decided on a plan that involved Quill heading back to the Razor Crest with Grogu. The rest would pretend they'd captured Mando and go to the clients with the child's pram in an attempt to get close enough to kill him. Only before Quill could make it back, a pair of scout troopers intercepted Djarin's message telling him to get off the planet. As the action jumped between Quill getting closer to the ship's opening door on his blurg, and Mando desperately trying to get a reply from him on his comlink, everyone feared the worst. Said worst was then coldly confirmed as a shot of Grogu on the ground suddenly popped on screen, soon followed by the smoking body of a fallen Quill. He was within touching distance of saving both himself and the precious child, but this free Ugnaught tragically could not make it out of Chapter 7, The Reckoning, alive. Thanks for stopping by to watch this What Culture Star Wars messed up adventure today. If you're having a good time with it, hit that subscribe button down below and you will get more of these What Culture videos in your life. Number 5. Sabaj Opress beheads the Black Sun. A moment so messed up it was censored when the episode first aired on Cartoon Network. Sabaj Opress' killing of the Black Sun crime syndicate was another reminder of just how dark Star Wars The Clone Wars could be when it felt like it. Opress' brother Maul had invited the Black Sun to join him and his Shadow Collective. However, when the leaders of this group refused, well, things got a little messy. After Opress had already snapped the neck of a nearby soldier, Maul soon ordered his apprentice to chuck his lightsaber at the folks sat at the table, decapitating each and every one of them with one horrifying throw of the laser sword. This was a, really horrendous end, even for a bunch of not exactly noble criminals, with each of the beheaded Feline's bodies lingering in the air for a moment before then crumbling onto the ground. That truly startling turn of events was enough to convince Zaiton Moj, one of the only Black Sun members left standing, to give Maul precisely what he wanted. Seeing your pals' heads rolling around on the floor will have that effect on a person. Number 4. The Stranger slaughters the Jedi. The Acolyte may not have been every Star Wars fan's cup of blue milk, but one thing pretty much everyone can agree on is that it boasted some of the most barbaric deaths in the franchise's history. As a number of Jedi came up against a masked figure wielding a red lightsaber on Kofar during the Night episode, it soon became clear that they had perhaps bitten off more than they could chew. In the wake of blasting away the Jedi via the Force, the Stranger then proceeded to stab and hack his way through many of the Force wielders. Now those ends were somewhat savage, but they were nothing compared to what this Darksider did to Jekki and Yord. Following a pulsating fight between the Stranger, Jekki, and Master Soul, the young Padawan unfortunately learned the hard way that there was more to this foe than met the eye. By the time she realized he possessed a 2-for-1 lightsaber, it was simply too late, with the Stranger using his secret weapon to poke holes in her like she was a microwavable meal. If that cold and disturbing act of murder didn't let viewers know that this bad dude was not to be messed with, then the way he dealt with Yord not long after likely did the trick. Despite initially getting the better of the person revealed to be Chimere, hitting him with his own Cortosis helmet and deactivating his lightsaber, Yord simply could not overpower this enemy and soon had his neck snap like a twig in front of Sol, Osha, and May. With or without a lightsaber, Chimere was one messed up dude capable of some quite quite messed up things. Number 3, Mando uses a door for death. Completely gripping viewers within its opening 5 minutes, The Mandalorian begins with one of the most badass introductions in all of Star Wars. Wandering into a bar on the snowy planet of Pagadon, the Beskar sporting Din Djarin soon ended up throwing down with a bunch of punters. Before he managed to save the mythol he'd been hired to collect though, Mando coolly provided the galaxy far, far away with one of its most ruthless kills to date. One of those people who foolishly picked a fight with this Mandalorian decided to bail when they realized what they'd done. But before that quarren could get very far, Djarin yanked them back into the building with his whipcord launcher. However, instead of just safely bringing them back in from the cold, Mando had other, vicious ideas. After that enemy fired their blaster at him, Djarin instinctively responded by sending his own shot towards the door switch. Sure enough, said door then closed on the quarren, slicing through them like a knife through butter. The sound of half a body hitting the floor was enough to shut up the room, and leave viewers at home no doubt stunned at Disney's new Star Wars adventure. That's one way to get your audience's attention. Number 2, Satine Kryze is murdered in front of her Obi-Wan. A decade or so after his master died in his arms on Naboo, ObiWan Kenobi experienced a similar devastating situation on Mandalore. Only this time, instead of it being Qui-Gon Jinn, it was his beloved Duchess Satine Kryze who'd been murdered by the horned menace known as Maul. This despicable act occurred during the lawless episode of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, with the Dathmirian Shadow Collective leader sensing the perfect opportunity for revenge against the Jedi who sliced him in half during Episode 1: The Phantom Menace. Not long after foiling Kryze and Kenobi's escape plans, Maul had the pair brought to his throne room, and it was here when he would force choke the woman Obi-Wan loved whilst he was held back by guards. And if that wasn't already all kinds of messed up, Maul then did something unforgivable after realizing Kenobi would never give in to the dark side. Suddenly impaling her with the Darksaber, a crushed Kenobi could do nothing but watch as a dying Kryze told him she loved him with her final breath. There's cold-hearted, and then there's Maul. What a messed up menace. Number 1, Darth Vader's village rampage. Though it probably wasn't quite as traumatizing as watching someone you love be brutally murdered, the upsetting rampage that went down in Part 3 of Obi-Wan Kenobi still likely left its mark on the Jedi Master. The Inquisitors and Darth Vader had found out that the latter's former master was on Mapuzo, so the Sith Lords soon decided to try and lure out Kenobi using some deadly tactics. Strutting through the small village where Obi-Wan was hiding, Vader didn't just start hacking away at civilians like the unstoppable monster viewers had seen in Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. Nope, this time he opted for a far more cruel and calculated approach, force-gripping a defenseless onlooker by the throat and squeezing the life out of them, snapping someone's neck and dragging another trembling villager through the street. The cyborg's actions here were nothing short of petrifying, and did ultimately force Kenobi to confront his old apprentice. The damage had already been done to this terror-stricken town and the viewer though, with Vader's brief but brutal killing spree being yet another frightening reminder of what the Sith Lord was capable of at his sadistic worst.